Hello and welcome to the third episode of Family Office Sessions with Agreus. We are joined today by Serge, Krancenblum, who is the chairman and creator of IQ-EQ, the corporate services and trusts firm, and Costi, who is a colleague of mine who leads our trust and fiduciary desk at Agreus. Welcome to both of you and thank you for making the time to join us. The reason I wanted to bring both of your brilliant minds together today is to talk about all things trusts. And it's been a year for it. We've had Biden come into power and we've had proposed billionaire taxes. We've had Brexit and what that might mean for things like social mobility and moving family office structures. We've had increased regulation and the idea of this unravelling of the Dodd-Frank Act. So there's been lots and lots of things to discuss. And I thought it would be great to get you both together today to talk about those things and a lot more. So to begin with, Serge, you are the chairman of IQ-EQ, the trust and corporate services firm that you founded some 30 years ago. What have been your favourite and scariest moments over those 3 decades?
I think it has been scary all the time. Because, you were mentioning the change in terms of regulations. And it has happened many times. There were big changes of regulations in our industry. And at the same time, it's a threat. Every time it's a threat. But it's also an incredible opportunity because we make money out of regulation. And this is really, the people in our industry, they were able to transform their business model to make sure that they would be helping, supporting clients, be they family offices or asset managers, through the new regulations, have been the winners. And there will be further changes in terms of regulation. It's more and more complex. It's more and more sophisticated, which means that people need support.
Yeah, absolutely. And to think about your role today, we spoke about regulation, we'll touch upon that again later. I think when we first spoke, you mentioned that today is actually the scariest time of it all. So perhaps regulation aside, why do you think today is a scary time within the trust world, or perhaps the whole world?
Because there are so many changes that have not been. Nobody could have guessed that there was going to be anything about the global pandemic, and also regarding the war in Europe. And look at the changes from one day to the other. You have people of one citizenship who are not welcome anymore anywhere. So from one day to the other, it's also a lesson. Without speaking of geopolitics, it's a lesson for each and every family office. They need to have a plan B. They need to have a plan C. You never know what can happen. You can be top of the list one day, and you can be top of the wanted list on another day.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is why it's so scary, and people are afraid of that. People, resent definitely, everything that is happening in Ukraine now. But at the same time, they realize that from one day to the other, their whole life can change. All their accounts can be blocked. Their family office can be turned upside down. So it's really scary.
Yeah. And I think we've been saying about how it's the year of unpredictability, or it's an uncertain era. But when you think about it, we've been saying that for about 5 years. We just keep saying the next year is the year of uncertainty. And talking about planning generally, as I mentioned, you're the chairman of IQ-EQ now. What does your role within the community look like? And I have to say, for anyone listening that doesn't know, you're on our Thought Leadership Council. So of course that's top of the priority list. But what does your role in the community look like today?
So my role, within the group is mostly strategy and acquisitions, everything which is non-organic growth. And also the strategy has been always fulfilled also through the acquisitions we have made. So we have changed the client mix, year after year. We have changed the geographies, and part of it has been done through important acquisitions, be there in terms of geographies, also of market segments. And that's what we aim at. But globally, my main responsibility and my main goal is to make sure that our business is going to be sustainable. And not only in the sustainability definition that we have today, which is mostly green and these kind of things, but it's to make sure that the business is going to be there 40 years down the line. And for that, you need to ensure that you are having the right type of services. You are looking after the right type of clients, and you have always to plan and to make sure that your business is going to be the business that first of all it's going to be acceptable, because some type of activities are not going to be acceptable in a few years anymore, and also to make sure that you're equipped for the next generation.
Yeah, and we've spoken about a lot already about regulation or the war in Ukraine, and a lot of factors that have impacted us over the last few years, such as the pandemic. We do a lot of, as we mentioned, thought leadership at Agreus, and one of the surveys that we conducted recently found that in-house at Agreus, a lot of the mandates and inquiries that we've been contacted about have been trust and compliance related. And so while that's always been a segment of our business that Chris leads, that kind of grew organically out of the family office space, it's more than doubled from the year before. So Chris, I'd love to bring you into this conversation in a moment, but Serge, what other factors do you think are at play that are really causing the surge in demand for trust professionals, both inside and outside of organisations such as yourself?
I think it's the overall complexity. Everything is very complex. Before, it was easy for family offices to plan and to do legal planning, tax planning. It was easier. First of all, the families were maybe a little less international, or part of them. Now they are very international in terms of the family members being resident in different countries, but also in terms of investments, in terms of assets. So they invest all over the world in order also to diversify. And as it is more and more complex, you need to have global support in terms of trust and corporate services, because each country has a different regulation. You need to be. You cannot make the economy of not being compliant. You need to be compliant in all in all terms nowadays, in terms of reporting to the authorities, reporting to the regulators. It's so important, and things have to be done timely as well, which was not always the case in the past in many countries. Mm-hmm. So you need the support.
Yeah, absolutely. And Chris, we spoke about the fact that we've got all of these factors and the demand has more than doubled from the year before. But imagine trust professionals don't grow on trees, maybe they do. But what are the challenges involved in now finding twice as many people as you had to beforehand?
It's definitely a challenge, but it's a challenge that we strive to commit ourselves and work hard to ensure that these family offices are covered. But I think firstly it's about having a strong network of professionals. Having covered the trust and corporate services space now for just over 10 years, we've sort of built those relationships with multiple jurisdictions, and working in small jurisdictions, the likes of Jersey, Guernsey, where it's very low populated. You have to build a trust with these professionals. Everyone's got mutual connections, so you have to be very careful with who you're working with, and I think building that trust with these guys is probably the first step that you have to do to build a strong network of professionals. And I think another challenge is there's a huge demand for trust professionals and having the right professionals in place, because having the right professionals essentially means that the clients are being serviced well. And I think where clients have to, the likes of IQ-EQ and other sort of trust and service providers and even family offices, they need to sort of ensure that the opportunity is appealing for a lot of these professionals, and ensure that they can add real value to these organisations. So that's kind of what will attract and draw in better talent, I suppose. So, and that can range from so many different areas, philosophy of how they do things, the culture environment, even reward structures, long-term objectives, and so many different aspects. Yeah.
So ultimately, it's about making a proposition attractive first and foremost, getting the longevity and the cultural fit, I would imagine as well. And something you mentioned is the likes of kind of Guernsey and these smaller populated areas that, as we know, have a lot of offshore jurisdictions in place and therefore require talent. How do you go about finding these people? I mean, we mentioned Brexit before. Has that played an issue? What are the things from a recruitment perspective that have provided extra challenges to perhaps the mobility of the professionals you need to move on and off of such islands?
It's a difficult one because obviously it's based on a situation basis, right? With a particular candidate or professional, they may be looking to relocate for personal reasons, in which case, we've helped many professions of that nature. But yeah, it's generally building a good network of these people and providing them with a good service and ensuring that, they can trust us. I think that's the main thing to ensure that we can do successful in our jobs as well.
Absolutely. And this isn't actually the first time that IQ-EQ and Agreus have worked together from a thought leadership perspective. Chris, you actually created a report with the help of some of your colleagues about a year ago now, which looked at where trust professionals should sit within a family office. So should that be perhaps within the family office exclusively? Should that be with an external provider such as yourself, or both? It'd be great, Serge, to hear your viewpoints on where family office resources should sit. Is it a combination of both? Is it kind of one or the other? And what are the perhaps advantages and disadvantages of each?
I think there is no truth in how you should organize a family office. It really depends on what first the family wants to achieve, and second, very often it's a question of the first persons they have to start the family office. Is it going to be more a legal person? Is it going to be more an investment person? It can change a lot. It can vary. And in the end, you can support the family office in a way of having basic support like accounting, reporting solutions, these kind of things. Or you can provide to them outsourced CFO services or outsourced COO services. Mm-hmm. And really, as I said, there is no perfect solution. And in fact, it's according to what the people want. Some people do not want to have in-house basic tasks. And others, they want to have control on the basic tasks, but they want to have support for very specific things that are too complex, or that they could not hire someone to do it in each and every country they're investing. So it's really, there is no perfect situation, and in fact we have to adapt to that. So we have to have, for example, as I mentioned, the outsource solutions for high-end professionals to provide them with talents. But also we need to be able, on the other range of the services, to provide them with very basic reporting solutions.
Yeah, and I'd love to ask you the same question, Chris, in just a moment, but while we're on the subject, that I suppose in a lot of businesses, when you're not dealing with family offices, there's perhaps more consistency, or there's a go-to-market approach, and you can say, well, this has been really successful for another client, so we can perform a similar strategy. Family offices where each family is as different as, or every family office is as different as the family behind them. What are the other challenges you have as a corporate services provider when approaching a family office or when having that relationship with those? What are the key challenges that you face?
It really depends on what is the the existing relationship we might have with the family office. For example, if we are their trustee, so we have an overview on the assets and liabilities of the families, because very often the people forget that there is a liability side of the balance sheet even for a family. So we have that global view. If we are just providing services to an SPV in one of the countries in which we operate in 24 countries, it's a complete different approach, in fact, because we are not going to be considered as being the same. They are not going to ask us the same type of questions or the same type of further services, and so we have to approach the client, the family office, in a different way. What we have seen is more and more the family offices are our competitors in terms of hiring talents, and they are also the competitors of private equity funds, as we all know. Or real estate funds if they invest a lot in real estate. But they are also our competitors. But we tend to be quite happy when they hire someone who has worked for them within our organization, because if everything went fine before, if they were happy of the service, and if the person who used to work for us was happy also working for us, but found that specific opportunity working for the family office, there is going to be a continuity, and we are going to be able to provide them new services and having a special link with the person. Mm-hmm. So that's also a way, I mean, we have experienced it quite a lot in places like, for example, like Luxembourg, where the people wanted to have their own family office at a certain stage, or a second family office. You know, they had their main family office somewhere, I don't know, in Asia or in London, for example, but because they had the structure in Luxembourg, they wanted to add substance and to start working from there. So they hired someone from us, but in fact, it creates a better link in the end.
Yeah, I can imagine. We speak about a gatekeeper situation quite often within the family office, especially when dealing with providers such as IQ-EQ. So I think Chris describes family office trust professionals as an agent that deals with both. And on that note, you mentioned the kind of competition for talent. Where do you think family office professionals should sit? Asking you the same question I did a moment ago. You place people within family offices, and you also place people within the likes of IQ-EQ, so you really do see the benefits of both worlds. Yeah. What are the advantages and disadvantages of each? And perhaps another question is, where would you want to be if you were a trust professional?
That's a good question. I think, just based on what Serge was saying, where a family office has taken a trust professional out of a company and there's that strong link there going forwards, I think that's a great point. It happens so often globally because that family office has built that relationship with that prospective person. And I suppose from an IQ-EQ perspective, as you say, you have to look at the positives, right? That person will have a good connection with you guys for hopefully the time that they're at the family office, so there's going to be the continuation of that relationship, which is great. But I think the pros and cons, just to answer your question, the advantages and disadvantages of whether to work in-house for a family office or to work for a corporate service provider, there's no right answer. There's pros and cons to both. It has to be on a situation basis. You have to look at each opportunity and work out if it's right for you or if it's not. There could be reasons to not want to work for a family office, and there could be reasons not to want to work for an international corporate service provider. So it's a very difficult question to answer based on what you prefer. You have to look at it from a personal perspective and how it fits well with your career and life, or whatever it may be.
Absolutely, it can be also a question of the life cycle you're in.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people have started with working with a trustee, for example, and one day they work for one family, and it's because they were very happy. They know the family. They were very happy, because the risk is you go and work for one family, and you have one employer, and you might have, if you have a problem with your only client who is also your employer, you're in deep trouble.
Exactly.
Okay, so a lot of people start by working for multi-clients in a trust company, and one day if they feel comfortable, they want to change their way of working, their life, and they know the family very well, they have experience working with them, they go for it.
100%. Yeah. So it's fascinating, really, and obviously, I believe no matter how big, there's always going to be a need for the external advice, the likes of IQ-EQ and so forth. So, it's key to their success for the family office. So, yeah.
And I think it comes back to that report that we did, which described it as needing an inner and an outer circle. Inner being the kind of in-house expertise within a family office, and then the outer advice. And it's that thing, isn't it? Is you, as a family office leader, will always want the autonomy and the control of seeing someone in your office and saying, I need you, whether it's 2 o'clock in the morning or perhaps later on at night. But at the same time, that can't necessarily be compared with the expertise and experience of an entire organisation. And so I think the conclusion is definitely you will always need both.
Yeah.
And also, I know a number of families that are they want so much security. They want to have more than the 4I principle. So they want to have their own people, but they don't want to be in a situation where their own people have the whole information and have the whole control and everything. So if ever they have a problem with them, they want to be able to separate from them without any problem and having a backup. So that's why, they work, and sometimes they don't work only with one trust company, they work with two, plus their own people.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And how would you, if you were informed, for instance, of a family that was working with yourself and another trust provider, would you have communication with them, or would they be treated as completely individual organizations?
No, very often, we have communication with them. So it depends how it's organized. Sometimes, you are the trustee and another trust company has the SPVs, for example. And so, in fact, you have to communicate because there is the direct relationship of ownership in one way or another. Other times, it's two separate silos. In fact, in terms of maybe one silo is going to be the investments in Asia, and the other ones are going to be the investments in Europe. And in fact, there is little less connections between the two trustees.
I can imagine. I guess it's interesting because we've always spoken to family office professionals about how you can be really passionate and really dedicated to your role, and family office principals want you to be, because longevity is so important that they need you to be embedded into the family, but you can't be too precious, because at the end of the day it's not your decision and it's not your wealth, and you can be the most educated and experienced person on that very decision, but if the principal decides to take another route, you have to stand there and let it happen. And I guess I've never looked at it in the way that as a provider you also have to have the same mentality, because in any other situation, if you saw a competitor on the same table as you, if you went to meet your principal, it might be perhaps awkward or a little strange, but it's that idea of working together for a common goal, which is whatever the principal wants.
Indeed.
At the end of the day. So I guess one final question before we move on to the final questions, and perhaps it's a penultimate one, is you mentioned the demand for talent and how a lot of family office professionals now have perhaps come from the likes of IQ-EQ or other trust and corporate services firms. Chris, a question for you. When a trust professional comes to you and says, actually, I want to move inside, I want to go and work for a family office, what can you prepare them for? What advice would you give them? What are the challenges that they can expect indoors?
I think, and this goes for anyone who wants to work for a family office, not just trust and corporate service professionals. You need to be able to wear multiple hats. You'll be thrown in the deep end a lot of times, and you perhaps won't have the support function that perhaps an international corporate service provider will have. The legal teams. You're basically you're a lot more hands-on, shall we say? So I think acting as an agent for both parties, my first task would be to basically know the professionals well, inside out, and get a better understanding of provide them with a better understanding of what it's like working for a family office and that particular family office, and being upfront and ruthless in times, because you have to let them know exactly what to expect, and if they're uncomfortable with that, you just have to move on and let them know that unfortunately this is not going to be quite right. I've had situations where candidates the first thing they've said to me is, what's the remuneration, what's the benefits, what's the salary, etc. It's not about that. You have to. This can be a sort of job for life for a lot of people. So, and for us working with these clients for many years now, we need to ensure that they're going to be successful for the long term. And I've had these situations, and I've simply just said to that particular person, that's not going to work. I can't speak to you anymore. If it's just salary, if it's just remuneration, then we can't work with you. So you have to be ruthless and you have to be consistent with all of the candidates you speak to. And I think, they have to know the ins and outs of what they're getting into and have a clear plan as well. That it needs to work both ways. Family offices need to provide them with an insight of what they're getting into, whether that's signing NDAs to ensure that they're fully comfortable with their long-term plans and objectives, and if it fits well with kind of what they're looking for in their career, really. So, yeah.
Amazing. I think that's some great advice for anyone listening. And to now perhaps recap on the trends of the year and the talking points to come. We've had regulations and restrictions, conflict and COVID, everything and anything. At the time of recording, I'm not sure when exactly we'll publish, but today it was Boris Johnson's resignation speech, and to actually be reminded of everything that's happened in the last 3 years, whether it was for perhaps, to save grace on the last attempt or to actually recap, it's amazing to think about the things that have happened in the last 3 years. And as you said, we couldn't have expected at least half of them. What have been the biggest talking points for you and your company in the last 12 months? And also looking into 2023, what are the top trends that you're expecting?
So we work with three kind of clients, three market segments. One of them is the asset managers, especially working on private assets, so private equity, real estate, venture capital, private debt. So this is the biggest market segment for us globally in the world. The second one is asset owners, and within the asset owners, the huge part, the biggest part is family offices, and the last part is large corporates and capital markets. So the big, in terms of strategy, we have been investing a lot in the US. Recently, we have more than 25% of the revenue of the group now in the US. We had almost none in the past. We had huge US clients abroad, so which means in Europe, in Asia, and even in Africa, but we didn't have them locally. And so we invested a lot. We made large acquisitions there. We are going to announce very soon another one. In the US, speaking of family offices, we see that the family offices are very often bigger than the funds, than the asset managers themselves, and they want extremely sophisticated services. And where we invest a lot in the quality of the services and the range of services we can provide to asset owners, to family offices. This is extremely important to us. And we have heard in the last 10 years or 15 years in Europe, a lot of things about family offices and ultra high net worth clients, people saying this part of the business is a little dangerous because you never know about the reputation of the client, the family can have reputational issue or these kind of things. In fact, those are incredible professionals nowadays. You provide talents to their family offices. Very often the family offices themselves, in terms of investment professionals or legal or tax professionals, are substantial. They are big, and they are, as I said, they are extremely sophisticated, and we work with them as if we work for institutional players. And we have to make sure that everybody understands that those important family offices are the ones that are going to be our largest clients in the future, because they are investing in each and every asset class. They are very diversified in terms of geographies, but also the family matters make it difficult for certain of our peers to service them, because they are very good when servicing institutional clients or servicing asset managers, because everything is very straightforward. The best solution is the best solution. But when you work for a family, the best legal solution is not always the best solution for them, because they are personal considerations that make, or family history that make things different. And you need to have, that's why we are called IQ-EQ. You need to have the IQ in terms of providing them the best solution from a professional manner, but you need the EQ part as well to understand how families work. And there is no one family, which works, which organize themselves like another one, but you need to understand that. And you need to be able to provide them services according to the EQ part as well.
Amazing. And something you mentioned about the US is something we're experiencing in Saudi Arabia and many parts of the Middle East at the moment, is whether it's off the back of an IPO or another liquidity event, we're seeing a lot of family businesses create family offices to really professionalize their wealth. And some of the existing family offices that we've been working with are so institutionalized. It's incredible. It's, as you said, there's no two that are alike, but would you say that's moving into 2023? That's what we'll see more of in the US and the Middle East and perhaps even parts of Europe, is the move to be more institutionalised and standardised, perhaps especially in the wake of regulation.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think also families understand the importance of hiring the best talents. And they do compete with the private equity funds or real estate funds, which means that they need, I mean, as you said, it's not only about money, but it's all about the remuneration model. So you cannot attract a person who would be a partner in a private equity fund with a family office if the person doesn't have a carried interest formula. And we see it more and more. I mean, we work for families where the head of the family office, of the investment office, has a kind of carried interest. So they take, for example, a lot of 500 million of investment, and 5 years after, they look at how much those investments are valued, and there is a kind of carried interest being paid to the with shadow shares, for example, or shadow options. I mean, paid to the head of the family office, and that's the way also to attract the best.
100%, yeah.
And it's really interesting actually, because that's in line with what we're predicting for 2023. Perhaps on a compensation front is the rise of the LTIP, and we surveyed our network and found that more than 60% of what we would describe as executives, so kind of CEO, managing director, and investment professionals, more than 60% would love an LTIP, but less than 1 in 3 receive one. And of the 1 in 3, it's not carried interest. It's more a deferred loan, or it's a opportunity to come invest, but after a certain threshold. And I think that's something we're really passionate about, is talking to family offices and saying, well, actually, if you want the longevity and you want this hire to stay with you for the long term, you want them to treat your wealth as if it's their wealth, not necessarily to spend it, but
if you want the best.
If you want the best.
Yeah. If you want the best. If not, you are not going to have the best.
Absolutely. And to perhaps give a final note on the talent front, do you anticipate LTIPs kind of entering the trust space, and do you think just this surge of demand is going to continue?
Definitely. I mean, there's a huge surge of demand. You know, the industry that you guys work in is such a administrative, ARN type, compliance regulated environment. So there's a growing talent in that particular field, and especially, as you say, for family offices looking to hire the best. Of course, you need to have the right structures in place to hire the best, and some family offices, unfortunately, they don't quite get that. They're not quite keen to offer these structures, which is quite surprising, because we've come across some top professionals who are sort of realising that now, and they haven't been rewarded these structures, and they've sort of brought it to their attention, and haven't, these family offices don't look to change their ways in that particular.
It might be a question of generation as well.
Maybe.
Some people who have created the wealth, in particular, think that they were the only one creating the wealth, and they don't see why they should share.
Yeah.
In the future. And I think maybe the second generation or third one wants to have the best professionals, and they understand what is to pay the best professionals. And I think to have an LTIP, to have an incentive which is in alignment is very important. I mean, even with us, we have now a little more than 4,000 people within the group, and within the 4,000 people, we have almost 400 people who are shareholders. So it makes a huge difference, which means that in our industry, I mean, most of the big players are owned by private equity, or some of them were listed. But the most important thing is to make sure that the people are fully incentivized, and the day there is a liquidity event, an exit, they need to also have a part of the value creation they have made, and this is extremely important. This is I think you cannot do it anymore without that. And I'm very proud to have all those shareholders within the group.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it just goes to show that, you've adapted to perhaps the new generation. And I think for the old generation, which is currently still in place now, for the family offices that don't want to provide these LTIP structures, it's kind of like they think that they can easily replace that person who's been in that role for 10 years. So they just think, okay, I'll just try someone else. But it's not that easy. That person has structured things for, I don't know, 10, 20 years, however long they've been there. So it's they need to reward that person and give them a plan for the next 10 years to ensure that they can be happy. So I think that's a good vital point for a lot of these family offices.
And I think without the danger of moving into succession planning and legacy planning, I think perhaps we're going to need a part 2 because that's all we've got time for. But for anyone listening, obviously, Chris, you're an Agreus team member, so you'll be on hand to answer questions. Serge, you're on our Thought Leadership Council, and so unfortunately, you're also stuck with us. Unfortunately for you, perhaps fortunately for us, to answer any follow-up questions that anyone might have. Thank you to both of you so much for your time and for your wisdom. That's it from us. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.